And good evening and welcome to the Kaufman Corner podcast once again as we're back at it, breaking down your boys in blue with us as always. Co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, co-author of Rob and Rany on the Royals, author of Rany on the Royals. You know him. He is the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, joins us here as we are wanting to do. If you're catching us via the podcast later on in the week, we stream live Sundays at 10 p.m., according to schedule permitting. But that's our timeline that we try to adhere to. We got some vacation stuff that's going to have us juggling some things, plus draft stuff, free agency deadline coming up. We'll be doing that. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Thank you for joining us here live tonight, 10 p.m. on Sunday night, July the 10th. We are talking Royals baseball, and we're talking about the fact that, at least when it was rough early, the Royals could take solace in the fact that they could look at the lowly Baltimore Orioles and feel like, well, at least we ain't those guys. And now the Kansas City Royals can't even do that because the Baltimore Orioles, in what is the toughest division in baseball, are now just one game below 500. Randy, the level of concern for Royals fans on this should be what?
Um, what color is redder than red? I guess was what I would say. Before we get to the Orioles, I wanna give a shout out. Today was the day they announced the All Star selections, as you saw, and I want to give a shout out to a guy who made his very first All Star team. It was a guy the Royals had traded for. At the time, maybe people thought it wasn't a great trade. There was some risk involved with it, but they acquired this guy, and he's made his first All Star game. I'm very happy for him, and that's of course Jorge Lopez, who, as the closer for the Baltimore Orioles, is a big reason why the Orioles are 43 and 44, and who the Royals, after acquiring in the Mike Moustakas deal, waived 2 years ago. The Orioles claimed him on waivers. The Royals never gave him a shot in the bullpen, and he is now a first-time All-Star with a 1.74 ERA that would look mighty nice in the Royals bullpen. So, shout out to Andrew Benintendi as well, who, of course, the Royals did trade for, and the rare time where the Royals decided to get transactional, and that has worked out to their favor, and the Royals deserve a ton of credit for that, the way that trade has worked out. And hopefully we will have another trade involving Andrew Benintendi here in the not too distant future. But just a reminder that even on the day that Andrew Benintendi made his first All-Star game, there's another reminder of some of the mistakes the Royals are making. And a team like the Orioles, who weren't even trying to contend this year. If you don't believe me, look at their payroll. But the Orioles, not even trying to contend, are almost 500 in not just the toughest division in baseball, one of the toughest divisions we have ever seen. If you take out in-division records, if you just look at the way teams play outside of their division, because obviously in your division you're going to be 500 when you add up all the teams, but looking outside the division, the AL East this year has won over 60% of its games. Our friend Joe Sheehan wrote about this recently. The average American League East team is 98 and 64 against the rest of baseball. And despite playing in that division, the Orioles are nearly 500. If I mean this without the slightest bit of hyperbole, if the Orioles and Royals had swapped divisions before the season and played each other's schedule, the Baltimore Orioles would probably be leading the American League Central right now. And the Kansas City Royals would probably be like 24 and 60 if they had to play the Yankees and Red Sox and Blue Jays and Rays game after game. Why is that? Why is a team that's not even trying to contend actually, move farther along in their rebuilding process than the Royals are after all these years and all these high draft picks and all these expectations?
Yeah, and that's the frustration. You hit on a bunch there. One, the Jorge Lopez thing is obviously as much as it is an attaboy, it's a slap in the face, right? That's where we're coming at with this, is that it's the misidentification of the pitching, whether it's who to draft, how to develop them, when to promote them, how to use them. That continues to be the single biggest problem, and this is another one that should absolutely frustrate Royals fans, should absolutely frustrate the organization. I had conversations with some folks, and I think this past week, and I think it's important to note where the expectation was, on. Yes, I am back home, by the way. Thank you. Made it back late, early Saturday morning, really. But they thought this was 2013. right? That's where this team would be, that it was time to assault 500, make a good run at it. If not, have good reasons for why you didn't get there. And it's not happening. We've discussed it. I think, last Sunday we were talking about that it was 3 weeks in a row of playing 500 baseball. It was 3-4 baseball this week. So that has them
Still not a
around.
winning week, right?
Yeah. It has
All
them
season long.
around. Where they are still at least somewhat, treading water on where they are, which I think is of note. But, we also talked about Jackson Coar, and, he looked like a bright spot, and now it looks like a blip on the radar screen. And it continues the trend of where the longer someone is up on this big league club, which when you're in the pitching staff, the longer you're around Cal Eldred, the returns seem to be diminished. And I think it's undeniable. And I am again left. I do feel confident that the ownership group of the Kansas City Royals are not going to simply sit back and say, yeah, just let us know what the plan is. We're here to support that. There is an expectation level. And if those expectations aren't met, that they will expect change. And if there isn't a plan of change, they'll make the change. I think it's competitive people. They're Kansas City people. They're not down in Arkansas, isolated and sheltered away from the frustrations of their own fan base. They live it every single day. And I think if there's one thing I could say to the Royals fans, I do not believe that the ownership will just have, this is not the early days of David Glass's ownership, where he seemed more fixated on trying to change and evolve baseball's economic structure than he did about winning baseball games. They want to win baseball games. They want to be a successful business. They have a deadline. They have a deadline to get a stadium built, and they'll be doing what it takes. But yeah, the fact that the pitching just can't get going, again, we're now in the second half. Like, it's already here. Excuses are gone. I don't know what else they need to see for change. For change to not be swift and immediate at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a broken record. Every week we're trying to come up with a new angle by which to say that the pitching is terrible. And this week we can use the Orioles as our
Right.
as our lead-in, because when you compare these two teams offensively, they're very similar. I mean, the Orioles have scored more runs, but actually, if you look at like on base and slugging, the Royals are a little bit better. So some of that may just be the Orioles are better, have hit better with runners in scoring position than the Royals have, but that's not really a skill. I mean, last year, the Seattle Mariners hit better in clutch situations relative to their overall performance than literally any team in recorded history. We're going back at least 50 years. This year, the Mariners are hitting worse in the clutch than overall. So the Mariners are an interesting example of a team that actually, in terms of the way they have played, they're a much better team this year, even though their record is still worse. So the fact that the Orioles have scored a few more runs, that's not the issue. The offense, we can get more into that, but the offense is not the issue. It's the pitching. The Orioles are not a great pitching staff by any means. They're 11th in the league in runs allowed. But you know what 11th in the league in runs allowed gets you? A 3.95 ERA. All right. What's the Royals ERA? 5.04. That doesn't even count today. Fine. And maybe it dropped down to 5 again. But that's a full run a game difference. Mm-hmm. Now, can you name like just one pitcher on the entire roster that has been a pleasant surprise this year? Just go down the list one by one. There are some guys who are pitching at expectations. Scott Barlow, maybe ERA is 2.33. Maybe that's a pleasant surprise, but I mean, he was expected to be the closer. He's expected to be the best reliever on the team. I think he has been a pleasant surprise overall over the last 3 or 4 years.
Can we stay on that one for a second? Because, you pick a team and I'll find you on almost any team, 14, 15 Ks per nine, right? It's the new revolution of baseball. We act like Scott Barlow is Dennis Eckersley in his prime in the city. Certainly at times the way he's used, you would think this organization feels he's Dennis Eckersley in his prime.
Well, actually, I think it's more Dan Quisenberry in his prime, the way that they use him for 2 or 3 innings. I mean,
yeah,
he goes out there a lot, which in fairness, if you were a contender, that's the way you would play it. You want to use your best pitcher more.
38 Ks and 38 2/3 innings coming into today. I mean, we're not talking about the most dominant force in bullpens here
and 5 home runs allowed in 39 innings. I mean, his FIP is 398. So, I mean, that ERA looks great. He's not pitching that well. Okay, nobody's really a 233 ERA pitcher, but he's good. He's not great. And I'm like, you have to really look with rose-colored glasses for any sign of a pitcher on this roster who is outperformed expectations. If I had to pick one person, it would probably be Brady Singer. I feel like Brady Singer deserves a freaking medal for having a 4.25 ERA, having only allowed 13 walks in 66 innings on a team that leads the league in walks allowed. You look up and down the organization at the minor league level. The one thing that this organization has a problem with, we've talked about this almost every week, every level, AAA, AA, A ball, their pitchers walk too many guys. All right, they have Zach Greinke is is exempt from the rules of the Royals. He's exempt from the rules of like pitching as a whole. He's transcended the whole concept. But Brady Singer is right there with Zach Greinke in terms of walks per 9 innings, and for that alone, I think Brady Singer deserves some sort of medal that he's at least throwing strikes. But he has a 4.25 ERA, and that's the guy who gets the gold star pinned to his jersey.
But so let me ask you this: what do we make of the fact that his 3 years, because he got all of 20? Now they've bought back some service time this year by sending him down early in the year, but that his fielding independent pitching is 408, 404, and 414.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in the big leagues for 3 years. He's basically, according to that stat, I'll even just call it rounding error, right? I could give you some case he's getting worse. I'm not. I'm just going to tell you, he's the same guy since he arrived at the big leagues. He's really no different. Now, I'll say this: his WHIP his first year 1.166. Next year, 1.551. This year, 1.173. Again, the middle year, he was putting a lot more guys on base than he is his first or third year, which basically just means they've been able to get back to where he was when he came up with almost no minor league experience. I mean, he's not getting better.
No, but when you're a Royal and you're not getting worse after repeated exposure to the pitching coach whose name I will not utter, that makes you a raging success. He's not regressing. That's all we can ask for. And I mean, but it's just really astounding when you go down the list one by one. It's like, now you just how many 14 pitchers on the roster? One guy should be a surprise. I mean, I guess Jose Cuas, you could argue just because we didn't expect him to see him in the major leagues. But the surprise with him is how he pitched in the minor leagues. He got to the major leagues. Guess what? He's walking guys. He's walked 10 guys in 16 innings. This is a sidearm ground ball guy who's a command and control pitcher. Even he's walking guys once he gets to the majors. They have no plan for how to get these guys to throw more strikes. They're like, oh, we care about first pitch strike percentage. Great. You have the lowest first pitch strike percentage in the sport. Don't tell me what you are focusing on. Show me results. There's none.
Yeah, there isn't. And I think that's where there has to be some kind of Herculean change, some kind of about face that happens with this ball club. I'll now say after the All-Star break. I mean, we're into the second half as it is right now. And I just don't know how that could. I don't know where that's going to occur, and I don't know how you're going to defend the performance of the pitching staff across the board at the end of the year. And I believe that there will be change.
Right. I mean, the one thing I will say, the one defense I will say for the pitching coach whose name I will not utter is the point you have made, which is not really a defense of him so much as it's a blanket criticism of the organization, which is when you look at the minor leagues. And you look at the way the pitchers are developing there, you realize that the problem the Royals have with developing pitchers is not limited to the major league level. This is an organization-wide failure to teach pitching. It just is. I mean, you can look at Alec Marsh, who came into the season with all this hype and who has an incredible strikeout rate. 71 innings, I think, in AA is like 105 strikeouts. Just stop and think about that. 71 innings, 105 Ks. You're thinking this guy's a beast. He has a 7.07 ERA because he's given up so many home runs and walked so many batters. You look at Asa Lacy, who hasn't pitched in 2 weeks now. Fine, he's coming off of an injury, but he walked 14 guys in 8 innings in rookie ball coming back from that. Like up and down, you talk about all the pitchers they drafted last year, the high school guys, Mazzucato and Curtina and Panzini. And Curtina, again, he's the Brady Singer of the minor leagues. He's the guy who seems to have maybe transcended the organization a little bit, and I really do have high hopes for that. But all of these guys walk too many batters. Mazzucato, I think, pitched today 3 2/3 innings, 4 walks, 4 strikeouts. I think the stuff is there. There's no command. So they have to make it. This isn't about one guy. It's really, I mean, I think they need to dump their pitching coach, into a time machine so they can retroactively dump him 2 years ago. But it's more than it. They need to do what they did to the hitters to the pitchers. So what they did on the hitting side, they need to do to the pitchers.
Yes, they have to have a massive overhaul. And look, and I'll go back. I mean, you mentioned Mazzucato before. No, it's on here in the month of July. Is he making progress? He has thrown 6 1/3 innings. He's walked 7, struck out 8. Right. So like the last 2 starts, like, oh, he just needed to get his feet wet. He needed to find his rhythm. No. And, I will say this, that, we're getting, and I look forward to, say, August 15th, where we will be with so little time left in the minor league season that I will tell you change must come. I am sick of qualifying everything I say about change within the pitching department of the Kansas City Royals with barring a major turnaround, right? That has almost left the station where I can just eliminate that and say a massive overhaul has to happen for the pitching, right? And whether I don't even care if Cal Eldred's involved, because it's clear to me that it is an organizational problem. And I pointed it out. I try to be proactive and not just reactive. And if you've been listening to this podcast from the beginning, some of the first ones we did was, listen, critical moments. And I've had arguments about this with Sam McDowell. And I frankly, my head was going to explode. I love Sam. And my head was going to explode in having this conversation with him earlier this year when he said, so it's all on Asa Lacy. I said, no, it's not all on Asa Lacy. It's on everything, but there's nothing good to point to at the big league level. Nothing for what we've just cited about Brady Singer. Jackson Kowar has gone back to being, an explosion waiting to happen, gasoline on the fire. There's nothing you can hang your hat on at the big league level to say we're doing it right. And then you add in, I said, okay, so then you're left only to look to the minor leagues. And if you want to find me the guy that was drafted in the 16th round and is mowing people down, great. Rany looks for him on our minor league minute. He'll scour the numbers. And
have you noticed that almost every single person we've highlighted has been a hitter in the minor league minute?
Yes, I have.
Yes.
And so, but at the end of the day, I said, look, you've got Asa Lacy, who you can't fail with. And well, guys get hurt. I said, you can't in one regime take 3 guys in the top 5 and have them be Luke Hochaver, have them be Kyle Zimmerman, and have them be Asa Lacy, to where, and I pointed out at the time that, it like alarm bells went off in my head when it was like, he's going to be part of a championship staff. Is it a starter or reliever? You don't take a guy 4 for him to be a reliever. You don't, particularly not in the shadows of Luke Hochaver at 1 and Kyle Zimmerman at 5. You can't do that. That says that you can't take him. And I said, okay, so they tried something new and they wanted to spread the money around. Great. But, and let's give credit. Caderna has shown, because I want to show that this is not a hatchet job and we're just trying to cost people their jobs. Caderna looks good. And I hear Caderna and Caderna. So at some point, if the family would reach out to me and give me the pronunciation,
let us know.
His 2 starts in July, 9 innings total, 10 hits, 3 runs. So that's a 3 ERA, no walks and 6 strikeouts. Right? Okay, we've got 1. Okay, of late. Now for his time now, overall, and again, this is a guy that they had their own plan that they're going to hide away, and then unleash him after this extensive training he was undergoing. With everything that whatever they were doing in the complex league or whatever the hell that thing's called. But he has 14 walks and 32 Ks with 27 hits over 32 innings. He's the best of the bunch. So, okay. I mean, and maybe he's going to emerge and you can hang your hat on that. But Frank Mazzucato is not doing well. And Panzini who's the next guy who is kind of in that signability bunch. He is not. Asa Lacy, you got an update? I don't even know where you get complex league stats, Rany, which you had last week on Asa Lacy.
I found the Baseball Reference actually does have them on there. And okay. I've looked it up. He has not pitched. Last week we talked. He had walked, I think, 14 batters at 8 innings and 3 appearances in the complex league. He has not pitched in the last week. I don't think he's pitched since like June 24th or so. So maybe they're reworking his delivery a little bit because clearly what was going on was not working. But it's not a great sign that he is the number 4 pick in the draft from 2 years ago has not pitched in 2 weeks, and it hasn't even come up. Like the fact that he is so far off the radar that he can just not take the mound for 2 weeks, and we haven't heard any news, is itself
he's not off our radar, and he's
not
not
off our radar,
radar.
But I mean, off the radar in the sense that like we're not getting updates on him. He's off the radar of the Royals anytime, the short term or even medium term, outlook. It's just it's a reflection, and I hesitate to play the game of find the guy the late round draft find from another team and compare him to the first round pick that is a bust, or so far has been a bust. But wouldn't it be nice if just once the Royals took a guy who just like streaked through their farm system, made it to the majors, and was like an immediate success? Like you would think it would happen occasionally. I just think it's really interesting. We're talking about 2 years ago, and the Royals might be like, well, they're still making it out like, well, it's only 2 years. He's still got plenty of time to develop. You know who was taken in the same draft as Asa Lacy in the 4th round? Spencer Strider, who made it to the majors last year with the Braves, and this year is one of the best rookies in the sport. Talk about a guy with 65 innings, 2.60 ERA, 102 strikeouts, one of the hardest throwers in the sport, was a 4th round pick out of college. And I'm not saying, look, 29 other teams passed on the guy too. But like, when do the Royals find a guy like that? When do the Royals get a guy not in the top, round or two that just hits the ground running, that goes to the minor leagues fast, doesn't have an adjustment period in the majors, and succeeds immediately? Why can't, after 15 years, I'm trying to think of the closest example to a guy who moved through the system quickly.
I'll give you what it is. The closest example to that is Brandon Finnegan, who
that's a really good example. Go on.
Let me say, I'm not saying he has the upside. At one point, you thought he had upside because he got to the big leagues and he was a productive player in a run towards an American League pennant. But that was a guy that everybody said, hey, this guy could relieve right now. He's got the slider. And basically all they had to do was not screw it up. And, to their credit, that's what they did. They didn't screw it up with Brandon Finnegan, and they brought up. But otherwise,
and they traded him at the perfect time as well. Like they got the exact amount of value they needed from him. He was there for them when they needed him in the wild card game, and then he was there for them when they needed him to trade him at the deadline the following year.
So let me ask you this. I mean, because 16 plus years now with Dayton Moore at the helm. And you and I can look at it and we can talk about the pitching. And listen, I remember talking to people when Bill Fisher was plowing into tables with golf carts in Surprise, Arizona, and was like 70 some odd years old. And, I was like, what's this guy do? And I'm like, okay, well, he had a title of, I think he was like pitching coordinator. I think that's what his title was. And I was like, okay, that's got to be kind of a figurehead. I mean, he was like, you're like, really? Like, it's like who got to bring their dad to fantasy camp, and he's getting to wear the uniform. And I honestly, I didn't buy that he was really the guy that was in charge. I'm like, well, this has to be like, Dayton Moore's the pitching whisperer, and he can bring some guys along with him that are buds, and they can all share in the rebuilding of the pitching. It's, when we're all still thinking, okay, they're going to throw, and Lamb and, that crew was all going to make it, Montgomery and all that group. They have never gotten the pitching right. And here's what I would ask you, Rany. I mean, they obviously got to a point 2 years ago where they said, I mean, I think they had to have feared for their jobs with Sully Matias, MJ Melendez. All those guys bombed. Nick Prado, they all bombed at once. And they have salvaged Melendez. They're trying to salvage Prado. Matias is not even going to get onto the 40. Or he probably will, knowing how they do things, actually. I take that back. He'll probably get onto the 40.
Well, he was eligible. He was eligible this past winter, and they didn't put him on, and
Right.
there was no Rule 5 draft, but I don't think he was not the guy I was worried that would be selected.
No. And so anyway, but sidebar to that. But my point is, like, how could you not, like, forget about justifying it, forget about what you say to me in an interview or Sam McDowell in an interview. Like, how do you justify staying on this course, right? As an intelligent individual, because they're smart baseball people. I know sometimes when we're banging the drum here, it sounds like we don't believe that, but they are smart baseball people. How, like, if we can sit here and go, where, every team has that guy that comes from nowhere to success. Not only do you not have that, your guys that you've invested heavily in don't deliver the goods. How could you not say we have got to go outside, guys, and find the people who are doing what it takes to pitch in today's game?
Here's what is so baffling to me is it would be one thing if the Royals just refused to acknowledge that the game has passed them by, that teams are doing new things, that all of this modern sort of baseball adjustments of the using technology to make a pitcher pitch better, make a hitter hit better, that it didn't exist. If they just said we're going to do things our way, it would be unbelievably aggravating, but at least it would be intellectually consistent. What is so baffling to me is that the Royals 2 years, almost 3 years ago now, acknowledged that the game was passing them by and that they needed to make a dramatic overhaul of the way they taught player development on the hitting side. And it is, we've talked about it a lot, but I still think there's some skepticism as to how much of a change that really is. Because like you said, I mean, like, for instance, Nick Prado, huge breakthrough last year. He's kind of regressed this year. Having a decent, certainly a much better player today than he was in 2019 when he couldn't hit 200 an A ball and hit like 9 home runs. But I can sense, okay, maybe there's still some skepticism. We haven't seen MJ Melendez really explode yet. Vinny Pasquantino's only been in the majors for 2 weeks, hasn't performed yet. So I think we're underestimating the degree of the change. And I want to point something out to you, a rare positive note in what has otherwise been a disastrous season. Indulge me for a moment, if you don't mind. I'm going to run through some numbers here.
This is a positive. Where you're going is a positive.
It
is
that
a tongue planted firmly in
No.
cheek,
This is a legitimately positive thing, or at least an absence of a negative thing.
Okay.
That has not gotten enough attention, and I've been meaning to bring this up for a while, and I think this is the perfect time. If there is one thing that has marked the Royals as an organization for the last 40 years through some of the best times in this organization's history, two world championships, to the losing 100 games 3 years in a row. There's one fundamental philosophy that this organization has held to, and that is swing at everything. Okay? I mean, you laugh, but it is the consistency with which this organization refuses to draw walks is going on 2 generations now. It is absolutely eerie, the consistency. And as somebody who, came to analytics as a teenager in the late 90s, at the very early on in this, and one of the the principal rules of sabermetrics in the early days, when no team was actually embracing it, was that walks were underrated, that on base percentage was more valuable than batting average. It has been a unique source of frustration for me that my team has been the team that has been last by a mile in walks over the last 30-40 years. I'm going to go through, here's where the Royals have ranked in walks in the American League over the last 40 years, starting in 1981. I'm going to do this quickly. This may sound repetitive, but I think it's an important thing to emphasize just how long this has been going on. Also, we need to fill time. So, since 1981, they have ranked 10th in the American League in walks, 13th. Remember, 14-team league. Okay, so 10th, then 13th, 14th, 14th again, 12th, 13th, 10th, 9th, And then in 1989, God bless Kevin Seitzer, they finished 5th. 1989, incidentally.
And they won I think, 93 games.
92 games, which, aside from the World Championship year of 2015, is the most winning team in that 40-year stretch. Even the 85 team that won the World Series only won 91 games. So 1989, they were 5th in the league in walks, in the top half of the league. So think about that, 14 teams. So to be 7th would just put you in the top half. You just need to be in the top 7, okay? 1989, they were 5th, also had the most wins of any year other than 2015. Going back now, 1990, 10th, 10th, 13th, 14th, 12th, 13th, 12th, 9th, 12th, 10th, 14th, 14th again, 8th, 9th, 13th, 12th, 10th. And now we get into the Dayton Moore's years. So that's 2006, they were 10th. Dayton Moore comes in, completely new organization. But we knew early on, coming from the Braves, they emphasized pitching and athleticism and defense. The Braves way did not emphasize plate discipline. And sure enough, if anything, things got worse. Starting in 2007, 13th, 14th, 13th, 9th, 11th, 14th, again, dead last. 2013, the Astros changed league. So now it was possible to finish 15th. And in 2013, they were 13th. This is quite incredible. 2014, 15th. 2015, 15th. They went to back-to-back World Series, finishing dead last in the league in walks both years. 15th again in 2016, 15th again in 2017. 4 years in a row, they were dead last. 13th, 13th, 12th, and last year, 15th. In 41 seasons, from 1981 to 2021, the Royals finished dead last in the American League in walks drawn 12 times in 41 years. They finished in the bottom 3 27 times in 41 years. 2 out of every 3 years, they were in the bottom 3.
Quick timeout. Again, this is a positive.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Okay.
But
okay.
in order to establish I'm trying to establish the majesty of mediocrity. Okay. Because in those 41 years, 27 times the bottom 3, the one time, once, they finished above in the top half of the league. Where do the Royals rank this year?
Have not looked. I'm assuming that based on this whole buildup, we're going to find like 8th or 7th. They're going to
they currently rank 7th coming into today. I believe we're tied with the Red Sox, and I believe the Red Sox probably drew more walks than today, so they may rank 8th. But it's actually even better than that because the Royals, by virtue of playing a couple fewer games and also not having a great offense, have had fewer plate appearances in which to draw those walks.
Right.
If you look at walk percentage, they're 6th. And actually, if you look at it since May 16th, the day Alex Zumwalt took over as hitting coach, they are 5th in walk percentage. If you look at it from June 1st, they're 4th. And if you look at it since June 15th, which, okay, it's only about 3 or 4 weeks, but this knocked me out of my chair. They're 3rd in the American League in walk rate over the last 4 weeks. The only teams ahead of them are the Yankees and the Astros. Like, when is the last time we put the Royals in league with the Yankees and Astros in anything for any span of time? The walk rate, and it's funny because when they signed Carlos Santana last year, that was, the first obvious move of an organization that valued plate discipline that I had seen really in the Dayton Moore era. And I was really hopeful that that would have a huge impact. And it didn't, because last year they finished. Yes, my positivity is a tad depressing, Jeff. I agree. But I'm making the point. This is something that has been going on for my entire life as a Royals fan. And I would have gray hair if I had hair in the first place. So that tells you how long I've been a fan. Finally, we're seeing a sea change here. And again, Carlos Santana drew 86 walks last year, the most walks by any Royal, I think, this century, if I recall, since like Jose Offerman in the mid-90s, but they still finished last. This year, even when Carlos Santana wasn't hitting, he was walking. But you know what? Carlos Santana isn't there anymore. I mean, he drew a bunch of walks while he was here, but he's not the reason why the Royals are where they are in walks. MJ Melendez has a really good walk rate. Vinny Pasquantino in small playing time has a good walk rate. Benintendi has a good walk rate. I mean, Michael Taylor, we talked about this earlier, has just a massive change in his approach to the plate. His walk rate is way up. So there are signs here that the organization is changing for real the way that the things that they emphasize at the plate in a way that they have literally not done in 40 years.
The question is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and it's paying dividends. I mean, the offense is not great, but it's not terrible, and it's gotten better since they made a change at hitting coach. And all of this is a way to say, I'm trying to give them a compliment. The decision they made 2 years ago to radically overhaul the way they teach hitting, and we've talked about so many of the success stories at the minor league level as well. Those guys haven't proven they can do that at the major league level, but it's better than not performing at the minor league level. But that change they made is the single reason why I am not ready to just line everybody up on a wall and, dispose of them gulag style. Like, this is, they've made the acknowledgement that they were wrong, that they had to change, and they did. And I don't understand why they have not looked at those results and said, you know what, we did something difficult, but it is paying dividends. Let's do it with the pitchers.
That is the reason to be optimistic, right?
Right.
Is that if they can make that, which by the way, let's be clear, decades after should have come. So like that is the negative of your positive. Is that great? This is still long overdue.
It is, but the fact that the same people who didn't do it for so long were willing to do it. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Like, you have to give credit to an organization to a people
sure.
that were so set in their ways to make a change. And it's like they're capable of doing it. That's a good thing. Now they need to show they're capable of doing it again.
If, by the way, you're listening to us on the podcast later in the week, we stream live 10 o'clock Central Time on Sundays. You can be a part of the conversation in the chat room on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. And one of the comments here from Gary, Salvi also hasn't played much this season. Not great for the walk rate. I'll also throw in Adalberto Mondesi. It went down very early in the season. I mean, almost blowing up there. And I will push back a little bit on Carlos Santana is actually a big part of this, because even when he wasn't hitting, he was drawing walks. Mm-hmm. And so, and Pasquantino is not hitting at all. Let's be honest right now, but he has 7 walks to 6 strikeouts.
But that's my point, is they replaced Santana with a guy who has a walk rate that's very similar. And the walk rate, like I put out, was actually, they've gone up over the last couple of weeks.
And they replaced MJ Melendez with a guy who will walk a little bit. And who's gotten the at-bats? I mean, I know Bobby Witt Jr. was going to get his at-bats anyway. He has 19 walks on the year against 80 strikeouts. It would probably be Emmanuel Rivera, who's been a benefactor.
Right.
He's got 10 walks.
10, so, it's not great, but like 10 walks and 6% walk rate, it's not great, but the Royals, and maybe you're right, maybe it's just not having Mondesi in there with a 3% walk rate. But Salvi's played 2/3 of the games. I mean, Salvador missed the entire season 3 years ago, and that didn't help their walk rate as a team, go up very much. So yes, there are always reasons, but you would think they would have had an above average walk rate once just by pure luck in the last 40 years, and they haven't. Like, the commitment to swinging away has been so strong.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say the commitment to making changes, but no, you put it, the commitment to not walking. I mean, that's the only way you have those kind of results. It's not valuing that as all. It basically means that for, what are we 20 plus years, 25 years away from Moneyball, putting it out there for everybody in the mainstream with a book where the movie's got to be close to 20 years old now, isn't it? Of it being in cinema and putting it in front of everybody as to how it works, and to finally be getting to the change. You have basically said that is wrong, and we will not pay attention to it. And yet, I think the question is, will next year, will Salvador Perez play every day and MJ Melendez be the backup, and will Adalberto Mondesi be in there again as an everyday player, or will they continue to look to find guys who can actually draw a walk? We will find out, but it won't matter, as we're seeing right now, because the walk rate is improved. They're still a bad team. And so the question is, if you can't figure out that the walk, it's clearly coincidence, isn't it? I mean, because they don't seem to understand the importance of not walking guys. They haven't figured that part out
Right,
when it
right.
comes
They
to the
figured out it's
pitching.
important on off. Well, it's funny because for so many years, going back to the '90s when the Royals were still, a frustratingly mediocre team, but they were not bad because they had good pitching, and they didn't walk guys on the pitching side of things. It was so frustrating that they emphasized not walking guys as a pitching staff, and yet didn't seem to understand that you actually had some control of it on the other side. I feel like it's the opposite now. I think clearly from the walk rates on the hitting side, I think the Royals do understand that walks have value now. I don't think the reason that their pitchers are walking more than any team in baseball is because they don't understand walks hurt you. I just think they don't know how to fix it.
But Jeff Passan said this a couple of weeks ago in my weekly conversation with him, which is Thursdays. You can check that out at 810whb.com on it's our fourth hour, 5 o'clock hour podcast if you've missed it. But he said it a couple of weeks ago. He said, what's baffling is, maybe that's not how he brought up the stat. I'll use the term it's baffling, but this is an organization that understood frequency of contact with their hitters. Right. And so they, in winning a World Series and getting to back-to-back World Series, they could hit, they could get the bat on the ball. And when it got down to cut out the riffraff guys where you're going to have to swing because they're going to be in the strike zone, they played better. They played a playoff style of baseball, right? Because the guys who keep their bat on their shoulder against strike throwers are down 0-2 all the time. And, that's why the Cleveland Indians got neutralized. All those teams with Tomei and all the big bats will get neutralized when they quit getting to beat up on the fourth and fifth starter and the middle relievers, right? But the team emphasized frequency of contact, yet doesn't emphasize not frequency of contact with pitching, right? I mean, they talk about strike one. They've talked about, not giving free passes and control, yet they don't emphasize doing that to the other pitchers. It is a complete disconnect. And it is one of the more baffling things in the history of sports.
That's a really good point. And Kyle Boddy, who you may know the name, was the founder of Driveline Baseball, and really one of the people I think who's had as much influence on the way pitching is taught today as anybody who was outside of the sport. I mean, this is a guy who had no affiliation with baseball, opened up Driveline, and used it as almost like a lab to experiment with new ideas for teaching pitchers, and developed such a strong reputation that the Royals basically sent Kyle Zimmer to him because they had threw up their hands and had no idea how to get Kyle Zimmer, healthy, let alone throwing 90. And he fixed Kyle Zimmer to the point where Kyle Zimmer made it to the major leagues, which was a minor miracle, right? So Kyle Boddy made this point on Twitter a few days ago, which is, even though pitchers are throwing harder today than they ever have, right? Average fastball velocity is up 3 to 4 miles an hour from when we first had accurate, consistent measurements with pitch effects data from like 2007, 2008. In the last 15 years, velocity is way up, right? But the paradox is pitchers are throwing fewer fastballs than they ever have. And you know why? Because it works. And he made the point that all of the organizations who throw the fewest amount of fastballs, I think out of like the top 6 teams that throw the fewest fastballs, 5 of them had above average ERAs. And the 3 teams, including the Royals, who threw the most fastballs as a percentage of pitches thrown, were in the bottom half of the league. And when you think about the Dayton Moore's stated philosophy from the time he was hired, that like, what's the number one thing they want a pitcher to have? Fastball command. They always talk about fastball command. Command that fastball, and everything comes off of it. Well, what if we've been teaching pitching all wrong all along? What if actually the key is if you want to miss bats, the key to missing bats is to throw pitches that move.
Right.
And that makes your fastball. And if you use those more often, that makes your fastball better. There was the great quote. I just saw this. I think it was Jeff Passan who wrote about this just recently. Al Albuquerque, the reliever, you may recall. I think he was on the Red Sox at the time. Through what was behind 3-1 on a batter, or actually 3-0 on a batter, and who had the swing away side, and threw a slider, and got through it for a strike, and then threw another slider, and the guy swung it and was visibly angry about it, and basically was like challenging Al to throw him a fastball, and Al Albuquerque threw another 3-2 slider, struck him out, and as the guy was going back to the dugout, he basically yelled at him, "Hey, Poppy, if you want a fastball, you go to the cage."
Yeah.
Right, and that's, I mean, it's like, yeah, guys are hitters train on fastballs. So why would you throw them all fastballs? Other teams have realized the fastballs is, you could throw it 97, 98. If batters expect it, they will time it. But it's very hard to time and square up a pitch that's moving.
And one of the things that resulted in the Terry Bradshaw change is the Zumwalt approach to things is, so when they go out, when you go to the ballpark and you catch the tail end of batting practice, that's like for show. That's like to get warmed up, get stretched out, have a little fun around the cages. It's almost just like it's what we've always done, so we keep doing it.
Right. It's almost like a social hour.
That's not their hardcore hitting work, right? At one time it was, but now they do a lot more work, right? A lot more work in the cages, a lot more swings, and when they're doing that work, they do throw sliders and breaking balls. And it used to be, it's like, oh, time yourself on the fastball and then react to the other pitches. No, the biggest change in the Royals and what was not getting done that they wanted done was Zumwalt wanted guys challenged in the cage, right?
Which is astounding to me that they weren't doing that before.
Right.
But
and they've gotten back to doing it, and that's how he got these guys going. Is like, listen, you're going to prepare for what you're going to see. You're not just going to see fastballs pumped in there, right? And so I get that, and I think the thing that's interesting to me is because I had a lengthy conversation with this about with Ryan Lefevre not long ago, and he talked about fastball command, and I said, he said, remember when they used to tell guys like, he's better at 91 or he's better at, I said, yeah. I said, well, maybe they all are throwing easier, right? They're not throwing, but now because of drive lines and biomechanics and all that, they're now 95 is the old 91 or 90, right? That they can go 100, but they consistently are 95 and 96. And if that's the case, and your guys can't do that, then you're not teaching the velocity. And I think I also agree. I think, he's like, well, you see the best pitchers and are they throwing, their fastball? I'm like, no, but I think we discount. I said, was Max Scherzer throwing 98 when he first came up? You bet he was. And he was blowing people away with it. Is he now? No, he's a very different looking pitcher now. I said, but I don't think he could throw the breaking ball for strikes like he does now. Command it inside and out, get the great movement. He's learned, and maybe even his arm has evolved and changed. I mean, the whole bit about David Cohn's right arm is like 3 inches longer than his left arm from all the, all the pitching. It's like something ridiculous. Like you go through that, you go through physical metamorphosis when you've done it. I said, and maybe it takes 300,000 pitches or 500,000, whatever it is, when you add in all their bullpen sessions and all what it is to really command the breaking ball the way it is. But until then, you have to beat people with an overwhelming fastball, right? And then, so I think there's that part of it. The veteran guys can throw breaking ball, where the young guys can't command it, right? And they just haven't had the muscle memory reps that they need, or they're not the savant that Zach Greinke was when he came up. And then the other thing I think is they're throwing the fastball less, but they're throwing it better, right? They throw it less, which makes it look even faster. And when they do throw it, it is already faster.
Right.
So instead of it just being 98, where it used to be, okay, here's 88, and now here's 98. It's 98. Now you don't see it much. It looks like 102 because you don't see it as much. And they don't seem to be, and which one of those is right? I don't know. They sound pretty good theories. I like how it sounds coming out of my mouth. Is it right? I don't know, but I'm not in the get it right business. They are. Right. Those are some pretty good theories.
Who probably knows.
Figured out.
Who probably knows are the Dodgers and the Astros and the Yankees.
Yes.
Who doesn't know are the Kansas City Royals.
Yes.
I mean, if fastball velocity if fastball velocity was all that mattered, or even the most important thing, Zach Greinke wouldn't be on the team right now. Instead of being like, maybe their most consistent pitcher, certainly one of their 2 or 3 best guys. Yeah, exactly. As Jeff says, Greinke rarely threw over 91. He rarely throws over 91 ever anymore. but he throws a curveball 69 miles an hour that he can throw for strikes, or he can throw under the strike zone and get a batter to swing at, which then makes his 88 look like 94. And he throws it with command.
My question to you is, if Dayton Moore were drafting, would he have taken Zach Greinke? Would he have seen the talent? Would he have seen the brilliance in Greinke?
I would say probably not, but I'm not even going to say that as an insult, because most teams wouldn't. If I would honestly argue that Allard Baird's decision to take Greinke 1 year after he took Colt Griffin as a high school pitcher throwing 100, and it was already clear that was going to blow up in their face. The guts to go back to the well for a high school pitcher, but a high school pitcher that was the absolute polar opposite of the guy you just took. But you had to have some. He had some cojones to do that, and I'll give Allard Baird credit for that pick. It's one of the best things ever did.
You know who I'll give some credit to? Zach Greinke, who, when they tried to pitch him on the fact that they were getting close, said, "No, get me out of here." And
we will always be thankful to him for that.
Yeah, because I think it was a wake up call.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, and I think they got their next wake up call came with the hitting when all the prospects were dying, absolutely dying on the vine, and that was the wake up call. My fear is, what former Brave was Dayton Moore a part of the organization with in Atlanta that's now a pitching savant? Because I really feel like Zumwalt, I have ample reason to wonder aloud and maybe even conclude is a coincidence and not a sought after project that was built in the Royals laboratory of baseball. Sure. He is a back-assed into coincidence because there's a relationship, because he was drafted by the Braves as a player in 1995 and they knew his name. Like, do you think they're going to go down to the Astros organization and say, we're taking this guy? Do you think they're going to go deep into the Dodgers organization and say, we're taking this guy?
Do I think so? 15 years of experience tells me no. Right. But they better, I would say that it's really interesting to see what the Royals will do when they get rid of their pitching, the entire pitching apparatus that they have in place now. But the fact that they haven't gotten rid of it already is already such a black mark that you have to wonder if they're capable of fixing it.
Yeah.
But if they go out, we're just working under the assumption that there's no way they could possibly bring back the same people next year that they have this year. Except I thought it was impossible they were going to bring back those people this year after the performance last year. So if they go out and get rid of those guys, and then you and I will be extremely interested in who they replace them with.
Well, I think this is one that I think John Sherman and the rest of his ownership group do not want to hear their name being slammed all over town. And right. I think they will, if the debriefing at the end of the season is, yep, we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to get back to work in winter ball and we're going to keep on keeping on.
Right.
This
is one area where, as some of our commenters are saying, I mean, John Sherman's connections with the Guardians may be a blessing here, right? Because the Guardians are definitely a team that has shown the ability to develop pitching, and doing it like the new way. Like they have definitely embraced a new approach.
Yeah.
So the Guardians probably would not be the first team I would look to, but that is certainly
as
the Rays, the Astros. I mean, the fact that the Astros, I think the world of Brent Strom, and Brent Strom has had some success in Arizona already. We've talked about that. But the fact that the Astros let him go and have not missed a beat, it's not just one guy, right? That one guy is a front for an organizational philosophy. And as much as the Royals pitching coach is a disaster, as far as I'm concerned, he's also just a reflection of an organizational philosophy that has proven to be disastrous.
Speaking of disasters, let's talk draft. Before we go, we will next week, by the way, we encourage you to be listening because we will have the Royals, first 2 picks in the book?
At least 2, and we will hopefully be on air for the third, or that may be done already. We'll have 3 picks to talk about, I think, before the end of the end of the podcast next week. So we'll have the draft going on next week. We talked about it a lot last week. If you missed last week's podcast, if you're new to it, just make sure you check out episode 13 of the Kaufman Corner. You got a name that you are
zeroing in on, want to see in the draft? What you think is actually going to end up happening?
I mean, in terms of what's going to happen, nobody knows. I mean, this year's draft is going to be delightful chaos because there are so many. There's such a melange of players. So many players who have strengths and weaknesses. Um, we could see anybody, any of 30 different guys could be, taken in the first 10 picks. But in terms of what the Royals should do, I mean, of course, it depends on who's out there, right? If Elijah Green somehow drops, I would love for the Royals to take Elijah Green. If Cam Collier is there, I would love for the Royals to take Cam Collier. But if it goes sort of according to chalk, according to what the draft experts out there are expecting, and you assume that those guys are gone, there's so many college hitters, right, that you could pick from, and I can't pretend to know which one is better. Is Jacob Berry better than Gavin Cross? I don't know. I'm not an expert on this, but we talked about this last week. I just worried a little bit about taking the guy that is the 9th best hitter in this draft when not a single pitcher has come off the board. And yes, I am terrified of the Royals trying to develop a pitcher, but at some point they're going to have to make a change with the way they develop pitchers. If they're, if they have their choice of any single pitcher in this draft, I go back to the guy who, before he got hurt, was considered one of the best high school arms of the decade, and that's Dylan Lesko, who, I've seen him compared to like a Walker Buehler type, and had Tommy John surgery. He's going to be out for a year, but you know what? If you look at most of the number one starters in baseball, half of the number one starters in baseball have had Tommy John surgery at some point in their career. It's just, it cannot be a deal breaker. Not even with a top 10 pick. Any other arm injury, sure, but Tommy John is just the price of admission when you throw in the upper 90s. And before he got hurt, he really looked like he could be a top 2, top 3 pick. If I have no faith in the Royals as they are now to develop him, but man, I would love to get a caliber of that arm. That would be the best high school arm the Royals have brought into the organization since Zach Greinke.
By the way, Keith Law, whom I'll speak to in the program, my radio show tomorrow, and you can catch on our podcast at 810whp.com, does not have Dylan Lesko going in the first round. At least not the first 30 on his mock draft.
And that may be where if he doesn't go beyond a certain point, then the money, he's going to want so much money that he may end up going to college, and that's a possibility.
Right. And I think that will be interesting to see. I'm not ready to call for a change at the top of the Royals organization, but I cannot tell you that there is in any way, shape, or form any desire for me to have them call a pitcher's name. I completely understand.
Go ahead. I can't defend taking a pitcher with the organization as they are now. I'm just saying, on a pure talent play to get a guy, you might even be able to get maybe a little bit under slot, and then you save that money and you can get. We talked about the Kumar Rocker with the second pick dream last week. I just think from a talent management standpoint, it would be amazing. But yeah, this organization, what they do with pitchers and what they do with hitters, the safe thing to do is to take the best hitter on your board. And I would, if Elijah Green or Cam Collier falls to 9, I wouldn't blink. I would take one of those guys and go for
it. And what I expect to happen is for them to try to manipulate the board. And I think they'll go Jordan Crawford, the athletic outfielder of son of Carl Crawford. And they will be trying, and maybe it will be Dylan Lesko. With what do they have? What's their first sandwich?
35, I believe.
35?
9:35 to 39. Yep.
And maybe it won't even be Crawford, because if we look to Mazzucato, Crawford is too much of a known commodity to equate to Mazzucato. No, and then Mazzucato was a known guy, and he was a good young arm. But I think that, if we're looking, he was so far down the list, right, that like if they're going to go after Dylan Lesko, then they're going to throw him basically the same money. Like, I don't know why. If that's your plan, why not just take him at 9? To your point, I mean, it's Tommy John surgery. Everybody has it. So why not just take him at 9 and be done with it? I don't want to see that, but
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's my point is take him at 9. I don't think you're going to wait for him at 35.
I did find here where Keith says other guys that are hurt, like Dylan Lesko, will certainly be getting first round bonus numbers and could go anywhere in the 30 to 45 range.
Well, then, I mean, there's your dream. We talked about the Kumar Rocker with the second pick, but if they can, again, do the Justin Crawford or take some underslot guy with the number 9, like if they do that, if Justin Crawford, who I think is, I'm looking here at Kylie McDaniel's ESPN list, he has him as number 21 on his draft list, which is about where Mazzucato probably was. I mean, Mazzucato seemed like a crazy pick, but there was a lot of helium. And I think if the Royals hadn't taken him, there are a lot of teams in the 18 to 25 range in the draft last year. We're kind of hoping that they could sneak him with their first pick. So Crawford is I think comparable in terms of where he is on the board and how much money the Royals would save if they take a Justin Crawford. Just from a number 9 pick value perspective, it's not a good pick. But if they do that, immediately your antenna have to go off that they've got something big planned with that 35. And whether that's Rocker, whether it's Dylan Lesko, whether it's, I don't know, Connor Prelip is another, he was a college lefty, I want to say Alabama, who had Tommy John last year and is almost ready to get back on the mound, but was considered a top 10 pick before. There's a lot of guys they could consider with that second pick that would be really good value. So that's a very strong possibility.
And I would say that I think a lot of people would look at it and say anything but a pitcher. Right. And I've seen that all over the board here tonight. Just anything but a pitcher. Take hitters, trade for proven major league pitchers with your prospects. That's the thing to do in their mind. And we're going to see some of those prospects this week because the Royals are going to Toronto.
Yes, they are.
Find out who has had their shots because you cannot play in Toronto without being vaccinated. And this is happening every time a team goes to Toronto. And my understanding is there will be the number is not 1 with the Royals.
I think we're gonna be we're going to be shocked at the number of people who are put on the temporarily inactive list here between now and Thursday. I don't think it is a coincidence that today the Royals, I don't think it's official yet, but it's been reported in multiple sources that the Royals are promoting Michael Garcia, who was the subject of the minor league minute earlier this year, from AA. He's on the 40-man roster. So it makes sense if this is a short-term hole that they need to plug. But Michael Garcia, when we talk about the Royals and their walk rates, and you're saying how well Salvador Perez isn't there, Alberto Mondesi's not there, and that's true. But Perez and Mondesi, those guys are known quantities as hitters. They're not going to suddenly change their philosophy in the middle of their career. The key to watch from the Royals, if this new player development is succeeding, is the prospects they keep bringing up from the minor leagues. And Michael Garcia is a good example of it because he's Alcides Escobar's cousin and is a shortstop from Latin America. Fast guy, stolen 27 bases this year, good contact hitter. He's at like 290, but he also has plate discipline. And unlike his cousin, the biggest difference between him and Escobar, I would say, Escobar was probably a better player, a better prospect. Certainly, he was a top 20 prospect at one point. But Michael Garcia's got, I think, a 365 OBP. I want to say right now, 365 OBP, 397 slugging in AA this year. I don't think he's quite major league ready, but very good glove, very good speed. If he can hit even a little bit in the major leagues with that walk rate, he could be successful. But I actually think we may see him play. Whit Merrifield's got a toe banger. Or is it possible the Royals will just leave him out for the next week or so? We're gonna see some changes here, but
that's significant. I mean, I can tell you that Whit Merrifield is one of the names that's been discussed that would not be able to play in Toronto.
I don't want to make any accusations till we know for sure, but yes, I would not be at all surprised if he's out for 4 days.
Which is of note because he's a guy that he wants to, and they want him to play every day. And so that will change.
Wow. I hadn't even thought about it from that perspective, which is he has a consecutive game streak that is now, I believe, as of today, one of the 25 longest consecutive game streaks in the history of baseball. And the fact that if he is prepared to miss time in Toronto and let that streak end because of a refusal to get vaccinated, that is a commitment to an ideology which I must admit I do not share. And if can I go on a soapbox for just a little bit here, speaking not as a writer and certainly not as a politician, but as a physician. I don't get to talk much about the fact that I'm a doctor on here.
We try to point it out because when I don't, there's usually somebody who will get on me for not pointing out that you are a medical doctor.
Yes, I am. And I just want to, I'm going to make this as apolitical as possible, but I just want to emphasize to everybody that vaccines are the greatest advance in the history of healthcare globally by a factor of like 100. Vaccines have saved more lives in world history than anything else that doctors or the healthcare profession has ever done. And if you don't trust the science, then I just ask you to trust history. Because if you have studied history, and I'm a bit of a history buff, history is the story of plagues and smallpox and the Black Death and mass death on a scale that we just do not understand in the 21st century. And if one of your criticisms of vaccines is that they are not natural, well, I agree, they're not natural. And you know what is natural? A life expectancy of 35 is natural. 40% of children dying before they reach puberty is natural, and in fact was the norm globally until the 19th century. All right. So if you believe in natural outcomes, if you believe that vaccines are an assault on nature, yes, that is precisely the point. And I think so much of the reluctance some people have to appreciating vaccines is just a lack of awareness of how bad life on Earth was before vaccines. And the fact that we've eradicated smallpox from the planet is an absolute miracle. And the reality is, if vaccines were a ploy, were some sort of conspiracy to get people shots, we would still be giving people smallpox shots. And the fact is, we were so successful at eliminating this disease from the planet that nobody has received a smallpox shot in the public in decades. My parents, growing up in the old country, both have a big scar on their arm because the smallpox vaccine did leave a little scar on your arm. But I never got one. I don't think you got one, because you know what? It has not one case has been reported on the planet since 1977. And vaccines work. They do amazing miracles. And I'm extremely grateful that we have them. And the other thing I just want to point out is that for those who say that vaccines are a tool of big pharma, that people push them because of the financial aspect, I just want to say that yes, I am a doctor, but I do not administer vaccines. I have nothing to do with them. I do not profit from them. There is nothing in it for me or the literally hundreds of thousands of other doctors who recommend them. So I just wanted to make a couple of talking points and just remind people that vaccines are an amazing thing and that we are very lucky as a society to have them.
All that I will add is I'm 4 shots in. So that's all I can say. When they tell me it's time for the next booster, I'll be one of the first guys.
People are like, oh, we need to do this every year. Well, we do it every year for the flu, and I've been doing it every year for the flu. And if I want to keep my hospital privileges, I have to do that, and that's fine. And hopefully, it won't be every year. But if it is, well, that's better than dying. So,
yeah. So, all right, that's going to do it. Can't think of anything that can top that. Next Sunday, we will see what the Royals have done with their draft, and we will be live. Again, if you're catching us via the podcast, we'll stream live at 10 o'clock Central Time, talking about what is going on that night in the top of the Royals draft. Until then, Rany, thank you very much. Great stuff.
Just when you thought I couldn't make it more positive, I had to spend 5 minutes going on about vaccines and death. So, I brought in the Black Death into a Royals podcast. So, keep perspective,
Walks are walks, life is life. The walks are not life and death. So, yes,
Exactly.
positive Rany tonight. That's what we got.
That's
Great
right.
stuff as always. The good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, with us here in the program. My name is Soren Petro. You can catch my show at 810WHP.com. Thanks for joining us here in Kaufman Corner.